Hello everybody, my name is Ray. Welcome to the Evangelical Dark Web. Today we're going to be discussing Christian nationalism and how Al Mohler and Doug Wilson teamed up to represent Christian nationalism at the National Conservative Conference, or NatCon. And this is a fascinating development, especially as these two people have not publicly always gotten along, and there's a handshake that kind of shook the world between Presbyterians and Baptists, and I actually like to see that. I like to see that. Now, if you've been following Evangelical Dark Web, you know I call balls and strikes on people like Doug Wilson, and you'll also know that I'm not a fan of Al Mohler. Al Mohler has been one of the leading people that's pushed the Southern Baptist Convention specifically in a more woke direction. Now, he has flip-flopped on a number of positions. One of the positions that he's famously flip-flopped on is that he came back to the right conclusion on the idea that sexual orientation is not a biblical teaching. It's not a biblical notion. And similarly, Al Mohler is on a hot streak, and it's kind of strange to say this, especially as I helped fund a documentary that went after Al Mohler, the Enemies Within the Church documentary. I don't really consider Al Mohler on our side, and yet Al Mohler is open to Christian nationalism, which is interesting, and we're going to discuss in this video. And he also fended off a struggle session at the Southern Baptist Convention this past convention. And that was pretty ballsy of Al Mohler, the fact that he defeated a struggle session. And not many evangelical leaders have the gonads to do that. So we're going to talk about this Christian nationalist talk at this conference. But first, I want to let you know Evangelical Dark Web is a Christian news gathering and commentary ministry. You can support our work over at evangelicaldarkweb.org/join. That gives you bonus access, bonus content, and the least you can do is like this video, subscribe to the channel, to the podcast if you are new, and check out our free Evangelical Dark Web newsletter. All that's linked in the description below. And this is the previous interaction that these two had. Doug Wilson, Canon Press, promote Al Mohler. Was an article I wrote in September of 2022. And Canon Press wanted to market the fact that they had some of Al Mohler's content in their catalog. It is from, it was from an event that Al Mohler did that he, wasn't necessarily, taken with his permission, so to speak. And he tweeted this out. Evidently, a media platform has announced the release of some of my material. No communication with me or my staff, no permission from me. Material taken from my address to the Evangelical Theological Society. Take an aspirin. I'm not moving to Russia now or never. #Niet. Which I don't believe is how you spell that in Russian, but nonetheless. Al Mohler is, a little bit feisty at the time when being associated with Doug Wilson. But now we have this nice money shot handshake that really just set the Baptist world and the Presbyterian world, and we just have a nice little handshake here. And it's actually good to see. I mean, Al Mohler's shift to a more doctrinally orthodox direction is welcome. Now, obviously, we got to take it with a grain of salt, or we got to, pump the brakes a little bit because he is so quick to flip-flop, and he's not really repented of the wokeness that he contributed to in the Southern Baptist Convention. So, that being said, we got some clips that I want to tease from NatCon 4. And the first one I want to talk about is actually not related to Doug Wilson or Al Mohler. It's Josh Hawley, Senator Josh Hawley out of Missouri. And I was just in Missouri last week. And this is him championing Christian nationalism.
Some will say now that I am calling America a Christian nation. And so I am. And some will say that I am advocating Christian nationalism. And so I do.
So that was Josh Hawley championing Christian nationalism. You love to see that. I would love to see a lot more senators, congressmen, governors, and state legislators champion Christian nationalism as well, and hopefully we get a president out of that farm system someday. So you love to see that. Now, I take issue with Josh Hawley promoting IVF and a few other policy positions, but overall he's still an above average senator, which is a low bar, admittedly, but nonetheless he is one of the best senators that we have out of the state of Missouri. So this is Doug Wilson speaking on the state assuming the role of God if there is no God over the state.
If there is no God with absolute moral authority over states and their collective moral choices, then anything goes, including the worst forms of absolutism. If there is no moral standard for mankind collectively considered, then we can have no complaint against arbitrary and capricious moralities being imposed on us in arbitrary and capricious ways. If there is no God above the lunatic state, then the lunatic state is God.
So Doug Wilson is presenting it as pretty much he's destroying the myth of neutrality here, and he's ultimately pointing that the state must have a God, and if the state doesn't have a God, then the state is assuming that it is God. And what is the solution to that problem? Well, it's that the state must worship and fall under the one true God. So that is a pretty bang up clip from Doug Wilson, and the clip was promoted by NatCon 4, and they have not exactly published the full streams of these, I don't believe, but nonetheless those were the clips that they're posting online. This is Al Mohler's clip where he talks about maximizing the Christian commitment of the state and society.
I want to maximize the Christian commitments of the state, of the civilization. And I would call that acknowledgement. In other words, I'm not claiming that everyone in the state, every citizen is going to be a confessing Christian. I'm going to say that does not mean they're not obligated to the acknowledgement of the Christian structure of this civilization and its commitments.
So that was Al Mohler, and part of me wants to believe that Al Mohler is actually being more based than Doug Wilson in this entire event. However, there is one hiccup, I think, in this entire segment. There is some cringe that I must regretfully inform about this entire thing, and it's when they're asked about the Jews and the Muslims and the Hindus, and you see Al Mohler and Doug Wilson both capitulate to deviating from what Christian nationalists really believe, and it's kind of sad to see. Some might call it subversive, but to set up the context, Yoram Herzoni is the host of this event. He's one of the hosts of NatCon in general, I believe, and he's the panel host specifically. He's Jewish. He's also a big proponent of Christian nationalism, which is odd because I guess he believes that it's overall good. Now, take that with a grain of salt. He's a big endorser of Stephen Wolf's book. I never liked the guy because he did a PragerU video and it was really bad. And he's never overcome that first impression that he's had with me. So, not a fan of him. And when he asks this question, both Doug Wilson and Al Mohler fail. And this is the worst part of their panel discussion right here.
When you think of this coming state where the Christian commitments are maximalized, is there room for Jews or fellow Bible believers? Is there room for Muslims, Hindus? How do you approach thinking about a maximally Christian committed state in a world in which the partners for getting there, quite a few of them are not going to be Christian?
I would say briefly that Jews in this ideal republic that I would envision or that we'd hammer out, Jews would be more welcome than they currently are here.
Yeah, I would say enthusiastically so. And so, for instance, among my tribe, so to speak, theologically, it would be seen as a matter of absolute divine responsibility to be fully respectful of the Jewish people, fully protective, and have the Jewish people fully integrated in the entire project. And I think this is where also, quite honestly, where you have, traditional Roman Catholics, conservative Protestants, and conservative Jewish people who basically already live in the same world and acknowledge that and have a mutual dependence and appreciation. I think when you asked the question, though, you broadened it and you said Hindus and Muslims and others. I don't think a nation can survive without theological commitments. That does not mean it cannot allow others to be a part of the community and even invite others in a certain sense into the community, but it does mean that there has to be the explicit acknowledgement that this is a nation with specific theological accountability and theological commitments. Those coming should respect that, must respect that, understand that. And so the kind of modern secularist dream is, I believe, a constitutional nightmare.
I agree with all of that.
So that clip was pretty bad for multiple reasons. And they try to dance, they're dancing around actual Christian convictions because there's multiple compromises. Let's talk about the first compromise, is the belief that Jews and Christians worship the same God. We do not worship the same God as them. They deny Christ, therefore they don't have the Father or the Holy Spirit either. And they're not Bible believers either because they don't actually believe in the Bible. Let's be real about that. So there's one issue. The second issue, the second compromise, is they're treating one false religious group differently than other false religious groups. Now, I understand that, certain ones in the Middle East might be considered more barbaric. But nonetheless, I don't see how there's a mutual dependency between Christians and Jews already currently in the United States. Moreover, this political alliance that Al Mohler specifically was alluding to doesn't exist to our benefit. It actually exists to our detriment. So the idea that all of the evangelical political capital has been wasted supporting a foreign nation, that's to our detriment. We could have used that same energy and actually had more tangible policy outcomes that would have benefited us here. Instead, we have every Republican running for Congress on their website. They have to talk about Israel. And it's like, why is that one? You got like 6 issues on your website. Why is that one of them? So it's a major problem. And this was a major weak point in in this panel discussion. I actually thought that, Al Mohler was going to come across as based on like how Megan Basham framed this question and answer. But that is not what ended up happening at all, because that just isn't what ended up happening. So there is some other stuff that happened. Timon Klein also spoke at NatCon 4 on the separation of church and state has failed. And he said, this is a quote that they promoted. Timon's a Christian nationalist buddy, I guess. And everything was either explicitly or implicitly Protestant coded across states in the original Union. States didn't just allow but required teaching the Bible in schools. They had an entire panel on the separation of church and state has failed. And again, that's based. That's good to have. These are good discussions to have. So overall, I think this is good news for Baptists that you're getting encouraged to embrace Christian nationalism. Do I think Al Mohler is the best standard bearer for it? No, I don't think he's a good standard bearer for just about anything. Obviously, you saw there's some major theological compromise. The fact that he says that Christians have a duty to uphold, Jews. No, we really don't. So major compromise there by Al Mohler, even more so than Doug Wilson. Like, Doug Wilson's pretty cringy on this issue as well. But nevertheless, under Christian nationalism, we will treat false religions equally. So that's all I got to say about that for now. My name is Ray. This is the Evangelical Dark Web. Stay based. Christ is King. And we will catch you on the next one.